When asked, "What have you come for?" Baba would answer, "I am here to show that God is very close to you." I looked up at him like this and said, "Baba, have you come to give me your blessing?" And he replied, "Yes, you are mine." Sometime later, I fell into darkness and found myself in a dark forest. You always have a very clear feeling that it's Sai Baba who comes to you for an interview. Then our eyes met, and I got lost in his eyes. He raised his arm, holding a finger like this, and pronounced 3 times, addressing me, "You must, you must, you must." Sai Ram, friends, today we're going to talk with Imran Giri. I'm happy to see you here again. This is our second video. Good afternoon, Imran. Greetings to everyone. I'm very happy to be here too, together with all of you. Swami is here with us. Yes, and there's a reason for you to be saying this, because today we are going to discuss an absolutely perfect topic, Satya Sai Baba. This is why Swami is always here with us. As fate has willed, I am in India now. Through my window, I can admire the ultimate beauty of Mysore. I'm in the south of India. During our previous stream, we had a meticulous discussion of a very complicated and interesting topic, Mahavatar Babaji. Today we are going to address another topic, Satya Sai Baba. This is a perfect topic that is just as complicated. Before we move on, I'd like to remind our audience, and both of us as well, that this is a conversation. On the one hand, you are my guest, and as the host of this studio, I will ask you questions. But at times we are going to swap roles, and you'll have a chance to ask me questions too. We are both going to share our knowledge and experience while talking about the greatest divine incarnation of our epoch, Sri Satya Sai Baba. Here's my first question. I'll pick it up later to share my experience. This question is traditionally asked, and I'm not going to reinvent the wheel. How did you get to know him? How did Bhagavan Satya Sai let you know him? Why did you go there for the first time, and what was your related experience? This is how I would like to start today's conversation. Thank you. Thank you. This topic awakens the warmest, reverent feelings in me, and at the same time, I feel a great responsibility for every word I utter. When I completed service in the Soviet Armed Forces, I was already completely in tune with my inner feeling, the spiritual principle of aspiration. How to attain realization was the only thing I could think about. By that time, I had already let go of any attachment that could lead me astray, even temporarily. My mind and my heart were occupied by the only idea. I wanted to attain liberation. That's the only thing I wanted. This is how this life started to unfold. This may have resulted from my previous experiences or from my inner understanding. Or maybe it was the Soviet armed forces that influenced me this way. By the way, I served in such amazing locations to which Decembrists had been exiled. I appealed to the Creator within myself and asked Him, "Please, I don't want to get married." My family already expected me to marry and worked up this idea. I said that I didn't need anything. I took a job as a watchman. 1 on 2 off schedule. I practiced continuously day in, day out. Nothing distracted me from my practice. I brought the necessary portion of my salary to my parents. I didn't eat much and spent all my time practicing. Once in 1990, or rather in late 1990, early 1991, I had a very, very vivid experience while sleeping. It was a dream that I called an inner view. In that dream, I claimed that I wanted to follow my own path. All people were going somewhere, but I didn't want to join them. At that moment, I felt being turned around by a mysterious power and followed another direction. It was like an astral projection, so vividly I felt it. Sometime later, I fell into darkness and found myself in a dark forest. As a musician who often used various samples, I clearly realized that first, I had never seen that forest before. And second, the sounds of that forest were absolutely different. I heard night birds and so on. I understood that I was in the jungle, but I didn't know yet that I was in India. While trudging through the jungle in the dark, I suddenly saw a light ahead of me that seemed symbolic. I moved towards this light. When I approached it, I saw a temple, a white temple. It was deep in the night, but I could see that it was a white temple. However, I couldn't make out to which religion it belonged, because it incorporated elements of every religion in the world. Later, I saw it while visiting Sai Baba. Above his mandir, there is a museum of all religions. Later, I realized that in that dream, I had reached that temple. It was elongated like a Shaivite temple. Inside that temple, I saw plenty of people sitting in silence, very quiet. It was an early morning. People were wearing different clothes, either white or black. Some were sitting cross-legged, others in a lotus position, or on their knees like Muslims. All were quiet. I walked stepping on the black and white marble tiles that made the floor look like a chessboard. I stopped in the middle of the hall, trying not to disturb the meditators. The meditation technique that they used triggered my curiosity. And I thought, what are they doing? Can some of them explain the technique to me after they finish? I looked around and saw leaded glass that beautifully depicted the images of some saints, like in a Catholic church. At this moment, as I felt all this, an intense windstorm began to blow outside. You know, it was like an apocalyptic movie. Window shutters banging in the wind, lightning tearing through the sky, peals of thunder shattering the earth. People who were sitting in front of me in a semicircle began to scream Om and fell to the floor. It's hard to say what languages they used, but many of them were screaming Om. Standing in the middle of the hall, I was so bewildered that I told them, "You don't have to bow down to me. What are you doing?" There was no one in the hall but me and them. I was in the middle when it all started. That's what I said. As soon as I said that, a mysterious power, an energy that sent a chill down my spine, turned me towards the exit. I felt my legs shaking and fell on my knees. I was on my knees when I saw a short man, a very short man, wearing a hood. The hood covered his face. I only saw a shock of hair. The hood was amazingly beautiful. It was a blue, light blue, luminescent hooded cloak that emitted light. With a cane in one hand, he was looking at me. Behind him, people in white clothes stood in a semicircle. Later, I recognized some of them in Puttaparthi. They were young people, but I thought they were angels. Angels in human bodies, very, very beautiful. That short man, yet unknown to me, looked at me steadily. Then our eyes met, and I got lost in his eyes. For some time, I was unable to take my eyes off him. In that state of mind, it was only his eyes that I could see, nothing else. Just a moment later, he raised his arm, holding a finger like this, and pronounced 3 times, addressing me, "You must, you must, you must." When I felt weak in the knees and saw this man, my mouth, without my intent, without any awareness of what I was doing, my mouth, my lips, and my whole body uttered, "God." I knew that it was God standing in front of me. But my mind insisted, it doesn't work this way. God never appears in a human body. God is an omnipresent being. This is not God. But it was God. I knew it for sure. When it happened, when he repeated "you must" 3 times, it was my initiation into Dharma. He gave me a powerful impulse for doing what I had to do to attain realization in this life, and maybe to acquire certain external aspects of this realization. It was my first absolutely inexplicable and surprising experience of meeting the avatar, Sri Satya Sai Baba. It was later that I learned he was Sri Satya Sai Baba. I didn't remember that. But when I organized a birthday choir and took part in it in 2005, if I'm not mistaken, many Russians were performing. And after the event, Sai Baba said that all of them had been his devotees at the time of when he was Krishna. Many had been gopis and gopikas. I know that from the perspective of yoga, gopikas or gopis are the ones who are in control of their feelings, ascetics, not only those beloved by Krishna. And Sai Baba mentioned them. It was my first experience of meeting him in this incarnation. Several years later, I saw and recognized him on a video recording, and from that time on, I focused only on him. When I realized he was God, at first it was difficult for me to accept this idea, this duality. How so? But I trusted the feelings I had within and was aware of this energy and power. And most importantly, we had had an eye-to-eye and heart-to-heart contact. I felt that divinity that nothing could compare to, that no words could explain at least then, and I had absolutely no doubt about it. From that time on, my spiritual practice, sadhana, started to get better and better, and sometime later he began to visit me again. From that time on, I would have very serious inner views that guided me. It was my first experience. Let me share my experience too. Yes, sure. I got to know Satya Sai at about the same time. It was back in 1990 to 1991. Today, I have already published 3 memoir books to share many stories about him. I faced waves of this information coming from all sides. I met people. I was shown video recordings. In Moscow, where I lived, I met 2 Hindu students and found out that both of them were devotees of Satya Sai. There were a great many sources of information. I had no mystical experiences comparable to yours. However, there was a huge flow of information. Back then, in the late 1980s, early 1990s, we all remember how we got flooded by a flow of information on esotericism that had been forbidden. Of course, I remember that information about Satya Sai was very special, very special. And you know, a Moscow businessman who had traveled to the USA a couple of times by then, and it was in the late 1980s, early 1990s, he met devotees of Satya Sai there in America. This tradition was being cultivated there from the 1960s or even 1950s. And he told me, yes, he is an incarnation of Shiva, an incarnation of God. Later I thought of it with a bit of humor. Look how Bhagavan Satya Sai designed this game. At that point, Shiva was everything for me. From a very young age, I practiced yoga, read related books, and for me, Shiva was an embodiment of the superior guru of the universe, the sublime yogi. I used to interact a lot with that man. He was a businessman, interested more in Hatha yoga than in spirituality. When he came from America, he showed me a book and said that there in America he had been told that it was incarnate Shiva, incarnate God. Shiva and God was all he had to say to make me fall for it. Of course, now I know that Vishnu, Shiva, Allah, and Absolute Consciousness are one whole. But at that moment, the words incarnate Shiva triggered a program that was encoded in me. If I heard he was an incarnation of someone else, I don't know whether I would have reacted the same way. There was a time when I was more interested in wise practices, and miracles that Satya Sai used to perform were like a visiting card for me. As you remember, it was him who said that miracles were his visiting cards. Actually, this is a way to show his mercy. For some people, it plays a much greater role than for others. It may seem funny to hear someone blaming Satya Sai. Many people recognize that he is an incarnation of God, and there are many spiritual traditions that totally deny him. It seemed very odd to me. But on the other hand, this is a part of Leela. You've already mentioned Krishna. Let's also talk about Sri Rama. Let's talk about Jesus Christ. Let's talk about the Buddha. In the epic of Krishna, there were many wise men and spiritual teachers who denied Krishna. Now there are many spiritual traditions that favor him. Among them, Dalai Lama, Karmapa, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar, and of course, Ganapati Satchidananda Swami, whose ashram is just across the street. Ganapati Satchidananda Swami met Satya Sai many times. I was lucky to witness their open landmark meeting back in 2008. I sat in the front row. I didn't know this meeting would take place, but somehow I came to Puttaparthi when Ganapati Satchidananda Swami was there in 2008. There are famous photos. Other encounters with Ganapati Satchidananda Swami were held secret. They took place in Mysore and Bengaluru. They were never flaunted. I always knew about them because I used to live in Ganapati Satchidananda Swami's residence for long periods of time. Ganapati Satchidananda Swami is not a human. He is reincarnated God. But even he, at his level, is aware of Satya Sai being the most sublime incarnate. I think it was back in 1991 in Moscow when I met an acquaintance of mine who was from India. When in Puttaparthi, we were longtime friends, but then he disappeared from my life and I don't know where he is now. We were on an underground escalator, when suddenly he produced a little calendar with a portrait of Satya Sai and said, "You know, every photo. Why did he do it when least expected on an escalator?" But mercy doesn't take our expectations into account. So he said, "You know, every photo of Satya Sai is alive." Yes. Actually, if you recite a certain mantra with faith, and he began to recite Om Shri Satya Sai Ram, it is one of very subtle mantras. You either hear the truth behind it or not. So imagine an escalator going up. He is reciting this mantra, and I see ashes coming out from the picture. I was very impressed then. It was the first instance of materialization that I saw. Later, I witnessed many of them. But I'm happy because when I saw it for the first time, it was not a material miracle for me. But rather, I felt an incredible mercy of that man. I was very lucky to act as his interpreter for about 8 years. I came there in 1993 for the first time, and until 2000 I acted as an interpreter for Satya Sai rather often. I emphasize that I was not the only interpreter. There were 5 or 6 other people who translated much for Satya Sai. I always emphasize that I am not the one and only. I am one of many. But now I am sharing my personal experience more actively, and I hope that others who are still alive, some of those interpreters have already left this world, will also share theirs, because this is actually very important. You've already uttered this sacred phrase several times, inner view. This is going to be my next question. To comment on your first encounter with Satya Sai, I can say that when I was collecting materials, it was not always intentionally. In Puttaparthi, I used to talk to a lot of people from different countries, and now I realize that Satya Sai gave me materials for my books. Back then, I was just collecting them as information. I met many people who, just like you, came to know him through some mystical experiences that you call an inner view. I met people from Germany, Russia, Denmark, Latin America. When people had mystical dreams, met Satya Sai, and realized that he was the sublime deity incarnated on earth, they woke up, and several weeks or months later, they saw his pictures. It is really amazing how he summons his devotees in an absolutely fantastic manner. I have a very vast experience of personal communication, and I am happy to have gained this experience as his interpreter. I spent several years in the ashram of my teacher, Yogi Ramayach. Then I moved to the ashram of Satya Sai Baba, which was also very important. Satya Sai Ashram is the biggest ashram in the world, and I have started to publish wonderful videos about the ashram of Yogi Ramayach. 15 years later, I visited the ashram, the place where my Kriya Yoga teacher, Yogi Ramayach, had been born, and his tomb. It's very little. There are 2 or 3 disciples buried there with him. For me, it was very important that the cosmic consciousness of Yogi Ramayach was fully aware of who Satya Sai was. Yes, he was very reluctant to comment about this. 3 or 4 times, I witnessed people asking Yogi Ramayach about who Satya Sai was. All his replies were extremely laconic. Once he said, he is one of the major teachers in our Kriya Yoga tradition, full stop. Sometime later, he said, he is a very good object for meditation. Meditate on him, full stop. Once he said to me, yes, he is an incarnation of Shirdi Sai Baba, full stop. These are the 3 messages that Yogi Ramayach left for us. It merits saying that before Yogi Ramayach met Mahavatar Babaji, he had been taught by Shirdi Sai Baba. It was with Shirdi Sai Baba that the spiritual journey of Yogi Ramayach began. I think this is also very important and interesting. You know, I'll say it again. I am happy to have communicated with Satya Sai directly. But to be honest, even for such a person as myself, an interview is nonetheless more important. Because sadly, I have seen many people who communicated with Satya Sai just like me, or even more, on whom their simian mind later played a dramatically cruel trick. Yes. And they began to crusade against Satya Sai. They opposed him. They tried to denounce him and so on. Why? Because only an interview can bring you a glimpse of understanding of who he really is. So here's my next question. Can you reveal to our audience what an interview is? I don't even want to drill down into details now. Just tell us whatever comes to mind. What is an interview? This is an interconnection that Satya Sai himself used to talk about. He said, don't try to get an interview. It's an outer connection. Go after an inner connection. What is an interview? You have mentioned such great teachers as Ganapati Sachidananda Swami and Sri Yogi Ramayach many times. And through you, I would like to compliment them, because masters and siddhas are present on the subtle plane, and they are here with us now. And the diffused consciousness of all the Supreme Masters, who have already left their physical body, remains active. They are always here with us. Kriya Yoga practices that people do are always blessed by these masters, embodied as Satya Sai Baba, the avatar, Mahavatar Babaji, manifested Babaji. So we bow down before them, Padamaskar. This is a very important point. By the way, Ganapati Satchitananda Swami used to say that he was Satya Sai Baba's little finger. Such was his attitude. Or that Satya Sai was his uncle. They had very close relationships. I was very happy for people who were in close relationships with Sai Baba. And I always wondered, who am I for Sai Baba? Who am I for Satya Sai in the first place? And once Sai Baba showed me who I was. As far as these interviews are concerned, I totally agree with you. I'll use Sai Baba's words. He says, all of you are looking for an interview, but here's what I want to say. Interview, interview, interview. He repeated it 3 times. Why? Because when you come to an interview, you have mentioned it, and it's very important. You listen to Sai Baba. This is what Baba was saying. This may not be an exact quote, but it conveys the idea. You ask, and Baba gives you much of what you ask for. Then you leave and remain the same person you used to be. But when we meet for an interview, I change you at every level. This is the greatest power of the avatar who follows the principle of omnipresence. Thus, he can help an endless amount of people at once because he is in the heart of everyone. We know that Sai Baba was an expression of 25 aspects of the Absolute. This is a well-known fact. And we know that the 16th aspect is an ability to be in the heart of every living being. Only God is capable of this. When he was asked, Baba, how can I tell that you are God? The reply was, test me. Test me. How? For this, one must have a strong determination, faith, trust, and their consciousness must be able to permeate to the depths of their heart to find Sai there. For ordinary people, this is usually very challenging. This is why Sai Baba used to come for an interview himself, whether the person knew about it or not. Sometime later, they had learnt that it had been Satya Sai. There are a lot of examples of lives saved, very many examples. By the way, he saved my mother's life too. She wasn't a true devotee of his. She knew about him, but wasn't devoted to him. But now her attitude is absolutely different. If we have time, I can tell you this story. It was an exceptional situation where he demonstrated to me and to her who he was and how he worked with people. My brother, 9 years younger than me, already left this world. It happened when he was 31. Throughout his lifetime, he suffered from a severe disease. Such was his karma. Affected children usually don't live more than 3 to 5 years. Baba granted him 31 years of life. He took care of him throughout these years. We visited the ashram several times. And he even cured him to some extent for the time being to help him attain a certain level of awareness. He would hemorrhage many times, and every time, before, during, or after it happened, Baba would come to me and to him and help. You see, a person suffered from severe bleedings every year, but his organs and systems kept functioning. It usually took him a week to recover, and he would go on with his service. I want to say that my late brother, who is in the higher realms now and has become one with Bhagavan, lived until the age of 31. 5 days before his next birthday, he left his body due to certain circumstances. He practiced Islam, and for him Satya Sai Baba was neither a human nor God incarnate. He realized that he was a sublime being. This is a very important point. During a darshan, he would pray to the Almighty Allah, reciting Islamic prayers. And throughout all this time, Sai Baba took care of him and helped him. My brother realized that it was an entity that was impossible to describe. There are no words that would describe Bhagavan. We endeavor to do it, but in fact it's impossible, because he is fathomless, and he urged us to love it. Love my inscrutability, Sai Baba used to say. It doesn't let us tell exactly who he is. We can only say that he is God, the creator, an incarnation of Shiva and Shakti energy, the absolute or the manifested. These are just words. But the traits of Satya Sai are capable of showing who he really is. I wanted to say that every time my late brother had a hemorrhage, which happened every year, Satya Sai would come to me and to him in an interview and clearly tell us what to do. He gave us an understanding and helped to cope with it, and nothing happened to my brother. Normally, it takes people very long to recover after a hemorrhage. It affects the function of arms or legs, but nothing of the kind happened to him. He always recovered. He would have 5 hemorrhages every year. And every time he recovered and went on with his ordinary life, communicated, worked, and served. This is the story of my brother. In 2005, in the night of Mahashivaratri, Sai Baba took me and my brother for an interview. I learnt it later from him. We slept in different places, in different Nords. He took both of us. We were together in that secret room to which he invited people one by one. In the subtle body? In the subtle body, yes. I know this place, I know what it all looks like, and it is much more real than in the material world. We know that the material world is mostly an illusion. The subtle plane is much more real, and yogis are perfectly aware of this. Ordinary people know now about it too. So everything starts on the subtle plane and moves to the material world. But the human mind is oriented upon only that which can be touched and felt. Some people say, okay, an interview sounds very interesting, but have you ever been physically present at an interview? You see, a physical component prevails for people. I haven't been physically present at an interview, except when I approached Sai Baba after he gave a blessing to the Russian choir for a concert. I was one of the first to approach him. He was sitting in his chair. I came up and knelt down to him. I looked into his eyes and mentally said, "May I do Pad Namaskar?" It happened in an instant. I'll explain for people. Pad Namaskar means to touch one's feet. Yes, may I touch your feet? Baba looked at me, and without uttering a word, he told me telepathically, "Why do this? You and I are one. To whom do you want to do Pad Namaskar?" At that moment, many people approached him. Many pictures were taken. Baba looked at me, and I kept looking at him. He said, "Look there," which meant, "Let's take a picture." I think it was our only encounter on the physical plane, even though it's hard to call it physical. All other encounters were within. They were related to the practice. All of our communication was related to my work in the world. All the communication that took place within was in an interview. An interview is an inner communication that usually takes place in a dream or in a meditation. It had to do with realization. Once I said that in the night of initiation to Kriya practices, when I was in Allahabad, in a holy place of Prayag, Sai Baba materialized his body and took me in his arms. He was very strong, rather big. He took me in his arms and put me on my knees face down with my back up. I looked up at him like this and said, "Baba, have you come to give me your blessing?" And he replied, "Yes, you are mine." He said it straightforwardly, distinctly, and clearly. Then what did he do? He passed his hand along the spine from the back of my head to the tailbone, like this. It was an incomprehensible sensation. Then he kissed me on the spine. You know, I felt uncomfortable. I had no time to do ablutions after sleep and felt sweaty. It happened at night. It was very hot in Allahabad. And I felt very uncomfortable in the arms of the avatar. But then I relaxed and thought, all is God. He kissed me on the spine. Later I learnt that a kiss on the spine is a blessing of an altar. The spine is the altar of God. Then he put his right palm on the area of the medulla oblongata and sent a flow of energy so powerful that all my bodies, like a vibrating string, came out one from another, and I fell into a deep spiritual trance for the time being. Then these bodies slowly came back. It was the moment when the world transformed within my consciousness, and he said, I gave you Shaktipat. It's a transfer of the Holy Spirit energy. And Kriya started to work genuinely. In this world, I have had no teachers except for those whom I love as teachers. I mean those whom I feel really good about. I respect the unity as a tradition. Yes, your stories are really very important. Thank you for telling us this. I know that on the one hand, it's necessary to share such stories, but on the other hand, it's very difficult. This is a truly great mission to share such experiences. And when we talk about an inner view, we are aware that it may happen during meditation or in a dream. Yes. And Satya Sai actively used and continues to use this method, although he left his body in spring 2011. It's odd to say that about incarnate God. He is still very active, I mean in the mystic world. Yes. For me, lucid dreaming is a very important topic. I've had a long-standing interest in it. I practice lucid dreaming and try to teach people how to do it, but it's very challenging. I can teach them certain things, and they may have accumulated certain experiences in their past lives, of course. In yoga, the essence of lucid dreaming is to meet the sublime masters, like Satya Sai Baba, Mahavatar Babaji, and many more. This is when Shaktipat, the transmission of energy, takes place. Sometimes information is transmitted verbally. People are initiated into the practice. But this is mostly a transmission of energy, of the divine grace. Yes. You know, when I talked to Satya Sai and interpreted for him in one room of his or in another room of his, I always tried to do it so that people could get the answers to their questions. There were pauses intended for me to ask questions. Sometimes he would just take me for an interview. I mean, sometimes I worked as an interpreter for him, and sometimes we had an interview so that I could talk to him in a usual manner. You know, on leaving the room in which he used to talk to people. Some of our viewers may know it well, but not all of them, so I'll talk about it in more detail. Normally, a meeting would last for an hour or an hour and a half, sometimes 40 minutes. There were usually 10 to 20 to 25 people. If he wished to have a tête-à-tête, there was a special room for this purpose. He would invite people to this room for 5 to 10 minutes. And you know, after an interview, whether I interpreted for him or just talked to him, I noticed that for 3 days I would look around and see that the entire world was made of the divine light. It didn't happen in meditation. It awakened through his mercy. That tremendous energy that this sublime deity had been transferring to me for 40 to 60 minutes. To be an interpreter is a fancy job, an important mission. While he talks to everyone, I am always a mediator, and certain energy passes through me in any case. When it ended, it must be a huge strain on you. It was a pleasure. Yes. I can say that this building, this sky, people, everything is made of the divine light. What are we talking about? What's the fuss? All of us and everything in this world is made of the divine light. There were different situations. Sometimes people would come to see Satya Sai either with me or with other groups, and after talking to him, they left saying, "So what of it? We didn't feel anything." Or, "Why such a big fuss over this interview? Why do they want it? He said something weird and materialized a thing." And I was surprised. I saw absolutely different spaces. And in this sense, an interview, this mystic experience of interacting with the divine teacher, is much more valuable, though it doesn't dismiss physical communication. You have told us how you approached him back in 2005 when you were in charge of the Russian choir. This is not a big experience, but nonetheless. I interact with so many devotees, and these interviews, when you encounter him within, first and foremost in mystic dreams, they trigger a tremendous transformation in a lot of people. It may happen in meditation, we can't cross it off. Now people gain highly valuable experiences while staying by the tomb of Satya Sai, but this comes before everything else, and this is the most important thing. You know, one of the core questions that I would like to discuss today is about Shaktipat. You've already said some words about it. I think it's one of the most important topics, and maybe the most important one, to touch upon in the context of the incarnation of Satya Sai, incarnation of Krishna, the Buddha, Jesus Christ, Zoroaster, Prophet Muhammad, all the divine incarnations. I'm not inclined to remain delicate about the following. Philosophers can teach philosophy. I'm a philosopher, so I can teach philosophy. Techniques? Yes, they must know how to teach techniques. There are many teachers who know how to really teach techniques. But there is something that no one can teach, and this is the true divine Shaktipat. Yes. When Satya Sai came out, he would walk along the women's side, then along the men's side of the temple, the mandir. He could talk to some of them. Even during an interview, I mean physical communication, he could look at the person. There was a remarkable woman. I don't know whether she is still alive. I think she has passed away already because in the late 1990s she was already rather old. She was from Australia. Her name was Littleheart. She is the author of one of my favorite books. She was an absolutely fantastic woman. I had a chance to talk to her. I've never mentioned her in my books. Too bad. In my next book, I should get it fixed. She told me that she had only had one interview, a physical one. And when she was in that room, Satya Sai turned to her and asked, "How are you, sir?" To an Australian woman, "How are you, sir?" She responded, "Sairam Swami, I'm happy to be here." That's all. There were no more physical conversations. But she was so connected with this absolute consciousness of Sai Baba that Sai Baba sometimes said that she was his secretary. If you can't feel it at all, he used to have a personal conversation with everyone. He discussed sensitive topics. Now there are many contactees trying to get in between people and Satya Sai. Yes, Satya Sai was very strict. He used to say, it's a heart-to-heart conversation with everyone. I can visit you in a dream or meditation if necessary. But sometimes he said, sometimes you can. He called her his secretary. She always remained in that flow. At that time, in the mid to late 1990s, I visited her in Whitefield, near Bengaluru. Though I spent days and nights with Satya Sai, I didn't feel him the way she did. So it's important to have interviews and inner views. Only then Shaktipat is possible. And it can only be given by Mahavatar Babaji, only by Satya Sai. A lot of people can teach others philosophy and techniques, but this can only be given by the Sublime Master. And it seems to me, I don't know if you'll agree with me or not, when Satya Sai came to see people, he was shining with Shaktipat. Some were ready to accept it, but others weren't. It all depends on people's level of consciousness and perception. That's it. May I answer now? Yes, please, tell us about Shaktipat. Tell us what it is. This is a highly important topic. There's a message that Satya Sai Baba left for people. He said something very important. It's absolutely irrelevant in which year it happened, because whatever he says is beyond time. He said a very important thing. Why do you chase after energies of human saints? No one can give you more than the avatar. This is just what you've been talking about. Only avatars who have come to Earth can give people what they crave. Teachers that we love and respect in this world, in this life, are tools in His hands. They are like transmitters who decrease the intensity of the energies before transmitting them to people. Of course, they can do it directly. Realized masters receive this energy directly from God, from the Creator, from the Absolute. But people are not prepared to accept such an intense power of spiritual flows. However, this is the avatar who gives moksha, or jivan mukta, to souls that are ready to accept it. This is either liberation they attain in this lifetime, or complete liberation, or shaktipat. Shakti means energy, pat means transmission of the spiritual power, the power of the spirit. Therefore, there is only one whose energy is of high quality. This is the Creator who manifested in this way. We know that Sai Baba is not a human. We know that this is not a human form. Because when the lingam was born, when he was creating this lingam, his temperature rose to plus 400 degrees Celsius. There was a research. They tried to understand what was going on, how such a little seemingly fragile body could remain unaffected by a temperature so high. To melt gold. I'll explain how I see it. He uses the power of his consciousness to collect atoms from the space, from the ether, from Akashi. He collects atoms belonging to this gold. This is a sublime idea. The process takes place in the area of the stomach. This is molten lava with temperature of above 1200 to 1300 degrees. It's the melting point for gold. It is being formed here. Then he raises it via the esophagus. And here it is formed into a big lingam that has nothing inside of it. This is a piece of gold that has just been formed. It's still hot. So, of course, this is no human birth. And Sai Baba never replicated anything. He used to say, I create things out of nothing. He creates. The notion of materialization may be confusing for many people. And that pure energy that has always existed, the energy of the Spirit that is always new and continuously self-transforming, the process never repeats. This is always a new state. It's endowed to everyone again and again in each lifetime. Of course, people are not always ready for it. This is why sometimes they get this energy through a teacher. They laud their teacher. They say, my teacher is the best one. Some smart Alecs even claim their teacher to be superior to Sai Baba, because from Sai Baba, they don't get the feeling they get from their guru. But their connection is karmic. Naturally, he will get this feeling from the guru, and he loves his guru. That's why he feels closer to him. The energy of Sai Baba, the energy of the avatar, passes through this guru to this disciple. And we can't say that he is wrong. This is how it really is. This is the form of perception they are ready for. Of course, the very notion of Shaktipat is very broad. What is transferred at this moment? Is it possible to describe what can be transferred at this moment? The entire universe. The entire universe relies on Shaktipat in its existence, essentially to separate part of himself from himself, to create this universe and his many spouses as a manifestation of this universe. Adi Shakti, the original power of the universe, the Creator did it through Shaktipat. Then there emerged many other forms of the manifested universe. For us, these manifestations are gods, goddesses, the entire hierarchy that was created through Shaktipat. Just imagine how great is the knowledge of the manifested universe that can be transmitted in a moment. And one has to unscramble this message, this Shaktipat that they receive, all throughout their lifetime. When we talk about matters that relate to mundane, philosophical aspects or to the astral world, we must keep in mind all other spheres and dimensions. Shaktipat incorporates all of them. It's not about mere activation of energy at the base of the tailbone and Kundalini awakening, no. Of course, there are other aspects linked to it, but I mean that it is not only a technical aspect. Shaktipat is the process of transmitting all, absolutely all power, love, absolute knowledge, wisdom, and experience accumulated in the universe. Simply speaking, Sai Baba shares part of himself through Shaktipat, thus showing how close we are. Whether we'll be able to assimilate this knowledge depends on our consciousness, on how we realize our brain's potential, on how we awaken it to put this knowledge into practice within. We must awaken this knowledge. You know that we have 6 sensitive spinal centers that people call chakras. They are a reservoir of the universal power and knowledge about all this. When chakras are awakened, we begin to realize what Shaktipat really is. But it takes the whole lifetime to see it bear fruit, or even several incarnations. But I know that if you receive Shaktipat in this life, whether through your teacher, master, or immediately from the avatar, it is probably your last incarnation. Because there is no more need for you to stick to the physical plane. Of course, this master can come back later. He can arrange for his coming back as a minor avatar. Some masters return consciously. They incarnate to... This is their personal inner choice. We know that in Buddhism, there are 2 types of liberation, Hinayana and Mahayana. There is personal liberation and universal liberation, the latter being the great liberation in the name of which the Buddha himself refused to stay in the transcendental world of bliss and now dwells between the worlds to help people. This is also why we can pray to him. Many Buddhists do. I'll tell you a story. Once a master was meditating, a Buddhist Lama, and there was a woman desperately praying to the Buddha for help. The Lama looked at her and said, "Who are you praying to?" He's attained nirvana. He does not care. He is beyond the world of desires and doesn't care about what you are asking him for. He is in nirvana. At this moment, the woman got what she'd been asking for. It means that the Buddha responded to her even though he was in nirvana. While being in the state of supreme presence, he wished to respond to her. This is not a desire people usually talk about. Compassion, yes, this is compassion. Simply speaking, he remained a bodhisattva while being the Buddha. By the way, evolutionarily, a bodhisattva has to follow a long path. And many masters who have become bodhisattvas can't complete the journey. They keep being compassionate to this world. This is a kind of an attachment too. Yes, the original source of Shaktipat is the physical body of the avatar. The physical body of the avatar is the greatest mystery. While looking at the physical body of Satya Sai, many people erroneously thought, here is a short man with a shock of hair. Satya Sai was very short. And this is your God? Some people asked. Yes, how can that be? This body, that is the greatest mystery, emanated this energy every single moment. And some were in tune with him while others were not. I'd just like to mention that again. Technically, he left his physical body in 2011, but this is also something incredible. How so? God doesn't come and go, he's always here. But okay, physically, this body was buried. And his tomb is the greatest artifact on earth. His tomb in Puttaparthi is now the source of Shaktipat. It's a shame that now there appear theories that this tomb is devoid of any energy and so on. Now and then we hear about contactees trying to redirect people's attention to themselves. However, this tomb is the source of energy. His remains are the greatest artifact, the source of the great mercy and Shaktipat. People who have never personally met Satya Sai come to his tomb now. They come and feel his presence. Of course, Shaktipat takes place in a dream, in mystic dreams, as we have already discussed it. This is the idea of lucid dreaming. Sadly, people practice it to get superpowers, to work with positive intentions, to entertain themselves, or to fly. That's a mess. It's not so safe, trust me, friends. The ultimate goal is, of course, to meet. This is very dangerous, both for your soul and body. Yes. When I teach people lucid dreaming, the first question I ask is, what's your purpose? Some people are confused about their purpose. I saw people who unlocked their tremendous potential when practicing lucid dreaming. In their dreams, they met Mahavatar Babaji and Satya Sai. And I saw people who spent the rest of their lives at psychiatric facilities or trying to remove demons. Exorcism. So it's very important. Nonetheless, Shaktipat is only possible in the physical presence of the avatar. His tomb gives Shaktipat. And of course, we can always receive it in the world of lucid dreaming. There is one more interesting thing to talk about. Satya Sai used to say, "I am not a guru." I was always surprised to hear that. Yes, of course, God is not a guru. Different teachers can deliver different techniques, teachings, write books, and promote philosophy. In my life, there were many important teachers. By the way, among them were also Christian monks whose teachings I followed and with whom I interacted, and Tibetan lamas. For me, Buddhism is a very important topic. Of course, Yogi Ramaya was my principal teacher of Kriya Yoga, but the major source, you've told us about one of your Shaktipats. I know that you spent much time in Allahabad and Prayag, and you saw the effects of Kriya after Satya Sai passed his hand along your spine. It was Satya Sai who did it. I mean that we may learn certain techniques, but for them to start working, we must receive Shaktipat. Nonetheless, and it may sound funny, in India there are several spiritual traditions according to which Satya Sai would come and give darshan, but he wouldn't show any techniques, that it was useless from the spiritual perspective. Of course, it's absolute nonsense. In fact, Satya Sai also taught techniques. He showed at least 3 great techniques. One of them is Gayatri Mantra, the greatest technique. The second is Jyoti meditation. This is in fact half meditation, a preparatory technique. And then he gave the greatest Kriya Yoga technique, Hamsa Sadhana, or Soham meditation. So Yogi Ramaya was absolutely correct to say that Satya Sai was one of the greatest teachers of Kriya Yoga. He taught Soham meditation, which means that he was a truly great teacher who also showed techniques. You can find them in his books and some of his videos. He also showed personalized techniques for Soham meditation, the classical Kriya Yoga. In my books, there are many stories that I share with readers. For example, about people asking him to initiate them into a mantra. It's worth saying that Satya Sai was not a religious person. This is a separate, very interesting topic. It may be sad that so many devotees in India are trying to make a Hindu avatar out of Satya Sai, which devalues it all. The issue is not whether he is Shiva or Krishna. He is beyond everything. This is very important. People used to visit him in his room physically. It was much easier to give them his blessing for practicing their traditional religion. To Russians, Ukrainians, Belarusians, for reciting Christian prayers. To the peoples of Dagestan, Tatars, Kazakhs, for Sala. It was much easier. It was even harder to receive his blessing for a mantra. Sometimes he would say absolutely amazing things. When people asked him for initiation into Shiva mantra or Gayatri mantra, he could look at them and say, "I don't like mantras," or "I don't like Sanskrit." Yes, it was a shock for people. Why? You could talk to God in your language. 2 or 3 weeks later, when I was there interpreting for another group, he would say, "Sanskrit is a divine ancient language with special vibrations, and I am going to initiate you into Gayatri Mantra." It seemed very interesting for me back then. Only 2 weeks ago, you were saying just the opposite. He used to break all beliefs that prevented people from forcing their way forward. As an interpreter for both sides, when people came to his room for an interview and asked, "Teach us yoga techniques," he replied, "What for? You won't improve your physical or spiritual health, you will only pamper your false pride." And he would start. His sense of humor was fantastic. Yes, yes. No actor in this world is comparable to Satya Sai in their ability to play antics. He would comically mimic yogis whose activity was meaningless. He said, "What for? We don't need it. Forget it." And 2 or 3 weeks later, the same Satya Sai in the same room would say, "I'm going to show you an important breathing technique. It will help you balance the energy and prepare yourselves for meditation." I thought, oh my God, what's going on? It suggests that he always applied a very personalized approach. And one of the greatest miracles performed by Satya Sai is his personalized approach to the tens of millions of his devotees. He always used a personalized approach. I'd like to tell you another short story, and then I'll ask you another question relating to Shaktipat. From my personal experience, I know that Shaktipat happens as follows. There is a seed that bears fruit within several years. Sometimes he would give his blessings to people or utter certain words. Sometimes he would say to me, "Now you are sitting in this room," and several years later, and so on and so forth. He predicted the future for me personally. So Shaktipat can be that seed that would sprout within several years, when the person is ready for it, and to the degree they are ready. I have already said that on leaving his room, I perceived everything as the divine consciousness for 3 days. This is my experience. Satya Sai kept a close eye on me to make sure that I don't get too much of that energy. Interviews took place once or twice a week. Once I interpreted for one group in the morning, and in the evening there came another group of Russian speakers for the evening darshan. They went to his room and asked me to translate for them. So I was sitting there in front of this sacramental room, and he said to me, "No, it will be too much for you. Go and fetch another interpreter." So I went back to look for another interpreter and asked him to translate for the group. My next question is not less complicated, but I have to ask it. How are Satya Sai and Mahavatar Babaji connected? This is very important for many devotees of Satya Sai, including yoga practitioners. This is a broad, separate topic, and I'm surprised at the fact that in the Kriya Yoga community, many teachers, including influential teachers, knew very well who Satya Sai was. For example, a principal disciple of Paramahamsa Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda, was an American. There exists a video with his memoirs about Satya Sai. He visited him in the 1960s. He had a profound understanding, albeit the fact that Swami Kriyananda was a principal disciple of Yogananda. My teacher Yogi Ramayach knew very well who Satya Sai was. Actually, Ganapati Sachitananda Swami, a Kriya Yoga guru that we have already talked about, also realized it very well. But let's not shame the great teachers of today. There are a number of them who don't understand this, sadly. Let's not judge them. Sometimes these famous teachers express their very negative attitudes. This is a very odd ego for a yogi, a very uncomfortable topic of how a yogi can go too far in their meditation and end up saying that they don't need any God. Anyway, Satya Sai has a lot of devotees who know about Mahavatar Babaji, meditate, and feel his presence. So here's my question. How are they connected? Both originate from one source. This is how I put it. Remember me mentioning Mahmud Baba, a saint from Dagestan, in our previous conversation? He is a Muslim who communicated with Shirdi Sai, which I witnessed. And Babaji appeared when I was there. He looked at the person, at people who asked the same question, in a very simple and even aged manner, as a friend. He said, "Look, there is only one crown, but the heads are different." He said, "The crown Which means Sahasrara, by the way. Yes, there is one crown, one king, one Sahasrara, but the heads are different. So if we say that there is the eternal Paramatman, let's call it Satpurush. Satpurush, the Father, the Creator, the Absolute. We already discussed it in our previous conversation. And we acknowledge and feel that this Absolute continuously emanates the rays of Shaktipat. There are entities that appear as rays and take on different forms of Satpurush at different levels. Say Mahavatar Babaji came in the body of Babaji Haida Khan. Mahavatar Babaji incarnated in the body of Haida Khan. Haida Khan Babaji met Sai Baba. There's a very good video showing them walking together in the Himalayas. But it sounds like nonsense. How can one be split in two? And they talked to each other and communicated as if they were not one, but two separate beings. And one procession would follow Babaji, another would follow Sai Baba. Why does it happen this way? These are leelas, games. The Creator shows different models of His existence. This is a game He plays. He likes to entertain Himself. He is alone. He has no one but Himself. There is no one but Satpurush. This is my personal experience. And I can say that when I felt it while being in this state, I felt very lonely. This loneliness encompasses the universe and even transcends it. You feel that you are absolutely self-sufficient. You exist one without the other. At the same time, while being in need of nothing, you still feel this loneliness. You don't need to create anyone, you don't depend on it, but you still feel it. This is why the Creator created Mahavatar Babaji from Himself and manifested as Satya Sai Baba. This is an absolute unity. But in our spheres, in the world of duality, in the world where the duality is more clearly externalized, this is an astral plane, etheric plane, and physical plane as well. Here we need this well-arranged matrix, this principle of generating models of existence for the many divine manifestations and many religions as well. That's why these religions need leaders. Here comes Satya Sai Baba, who says, I am outside any religion. I am not here to convert you into a new religion, but I support all those who love their religion and follow their path. If one realizes that they must go beyond the limits of the influence of this architect who has designed all this, he is one of the sons of God. He is known as Lucifer or Niranjan. Many know him to be the architect, the power of cosmic illusion, and so on. It is he who designed this model in this space. He is beyond the mental and causal planes. In this absolute emptiness of Manasarovar, while his consciousness is there, he controls these principles down to the physical plane, these worlds that we are in. Those who want to transcend it all must shift their consciousness to the Absolute, to break the hold of this karmic aspect of Dharma. Because we must follow our Dharma if we want to harmoniously act together. A vivid example of Dharma that we can witness is the hierarchy of power. Say military units, their structure. This is a hierarchy. There are soldiers, subordinates, and the higher command. We need it to arrange our life. But when we reach a level that goes beyond the multifaceted matrix, we begin to realize the unity of all this. You don't need any egregores. And Baba says, here I am, you have come here, shift your consciousness to the Absolute and merge with it. Yogananda used to say, if you are tired of karma and dharma plays, you have an opportunity to attain liberation, and this is Kriya. This is why they are absolutely identical, they are one, but they are manifested in different aspects. And it's really very weird, as you have noticed, that famous teachers who claim to have attained liberation don't really see this liberation. While remaining in the state of duality, they talk about unity. They remain in the state of duality because they don't realize that Sai Baba and Babaji are one. Once Sai Baba was asked a question. I didn't witness it, but I heard about it. He said, if you pray to me, you can think that you pray to Babaji, and vice versa. There is no difference. Because Mahavatar Babaji and Mahavatar Satya Sai Babaji, I call him Satya Sai Babaji, he is in fact Bole Baba, or the Father. The Father who manifests in one form or another. They say Babaji is handsome, he resembles Christ consciousness, he resembles Jesus Christ. These are images in people's minds. Sai Baba looks strange, I don't like this image. To this I say, if you had approached him at least once, you would have forgotten about images once and for all. You would feel that here in front of you. As I often say, even if we get all mothers in the world together, if we unite their power of love, it is still incomparable to the power of love that Satya Sai Baba gives when he emanates Shakti, this universal power. Once Baba was asked, Baba, why have you come here in this form? He had a great sublime sense of humor that only God can have. He looked at the asker, then looked down shyly and said, women like this form. This is how he put it. You know, I can confirm this. He was said, look, Bhagavan, all spiritual teachers wear long beards. Why do you shave? Women like it, he said. Yes, yes, he was quite a funny guy. Later he said, if I were very handsome, you would exhibit me for money. Because it's really important to consider the level of people's consciousness. Many are still at the level of Rakshasas. You know, during darshans, when we were sitting in the hall, Baba would say that there were a lot of demons in the flesh present there. What would those demons do at that moment if Baba let them? Actually, he allowed many things, and he still does. He lets demons seize power. He lets them do whatever they want. Because this is their form of existence. This is their way to express themselves. And it becomes clear for people what is not to be done. Many people scold Sai Baba. Some people still treat him poorly. Baba says, my mercy reaches even those who scold me because they often think about me. But you, my devotees who love me, don't think about me so often. His mercy was infinite. Those who hated him usually think about him more often than his devotees. So, answering the question about the difference, I can say that there is no difference. However, there are no physical similarities either. But speaking about spiritual radiance, here is how I see it. Babaji generated energy out of his essence, and Satya Sai Baba generated energy out of his essence. The difference is that Sai Baba is more dynamic. It doesn't mean, however, that Babaji is passive. They are like the dynamic aspects of the Absolute and the static aspect of the Absolute. They have different goals and missions. They vibrate at different frequencies in the manifested world. Although the primary idea and initial frequency are absolutely the same. It's like the sun. The closer to the sun, the hotter it is. Rays that reach Earth may be already cold to some degree. People sense rays differently because their conductivity differs. Some are good conductors and accumulate less heat within. But the vibration of the sun is still the same for everyone. Satya Sai and Babaji are the spiritual sun. You know, several years ago, I came across one of your posters on the internet. I remember it read Sai Babaji. And it's amazing how obvious this unity is. Of course, we people are made of flesh and bones. We belong to different ethnic groups, different religions. We are males and females, and so on. But even we are attributed to sublime masters, and there is a confusion about shapes, names, and more. In his life, Satya Sai never claimed to be God. He used to say that each of us was God. I heard him saying, forget about shapes and forms. The absolute divine consciousness is omnipresent. But how can we let go of this image, the form he took on? It's very difficult. It's very important for the eyes and mind to rely on externalized forms. That's how the mind changes. Sai Baba took on this form to heal the human mind, because if Satan exists, he is in the mind. It's an external human manifested feeling. It so happened that we have something in common with animals. Our blood that carries information is functionally related to a negative aspect as well as positive aspect. We have a choice. To get out of this world of duality means to find unity in our blood. By blood, I mean our consciousness. To achieve this, we must heal our mind. But how can we heal it if it always relies on something? The mind doesn't understand abstractions. It needs specifics. Sai Baba came in this strange form. Not much to look at. How can God look so weird? So our mind... To me, he seems very handsome. Yes, I also like the way he looks, manifestation of the sublime beauty. But sometimes when people look at his photo, changes happen in their consciousness. Why? Because at this moment their mind was set on something different, and the system of expectations failed. God is always the sublime beauty. But in reality, when we were there, we even couldn't apprehend anything. Do you remember him passing by? You just can't apprehend it. Here is a small example. I lived in Dagestan back then. When it was time for me to go, I had 43 or 45 letters, a packet of letters. People gave me their letters in which they shared their hopes and asked Sai Baba for certain things. It happened in 2003. I attended Darshan for several consecutive days. I had these letters with me and I prayed to Baba, please rid me of this load. I can't keep all these letters. I gave a promise. And I realized that it was I who promised. Baba says, it's you who promised. Baba says, it's you who promised. And I realized that at that moment some degree of ego was at play. I had taken these letters from people intending to give them to Baba. He would take them and I'd go home and say, relax guys, all's well. But Baba didn't take these letters on the first day, nor did he take them on the second day, nor on the third day. It was nearly time for me to leave. I was sitting there, and a Sevadal sat me in the front row. I'm sitting. The Sevadal noticed this packet of letters in my hands and handed me a note asking to give it to Sai Baba on his behalf. He was serving and had to do his job. He couldn't turn around and give it to him. It was not allowed. I took his note too. Here comes Satya Sai Baba again. I am reaching out for him. Please take them. He looked at me and passed by me. It was then that I exploded. My ego exploded. So solve these problems as you think fit. I am not going to offer these letters to you anymore. Several days later, I took the letters along mechanically. I came to the hall and sat on the other side in the last row. I was very, very far. There were a lot of people. Here appears Sai Baba. He used a golf cart back then. There is 10 meters between him and me. He goes slowly. Silence. No one is trying to offload letters onto him. By the way, it's worth mentioning that at that time, Baba didn't take any letters at all. I don't know why. There was a time when it was not allowed to give him letters. He just went among people in his cart and blessed them. Here I get up. I just get up and go to him, stepping over people's heads. It was 6 or 7 rows between us. I make my way to the pathway on which he is, heading toward him. I kneel before him, stretch out my hand with these letters, and wait. He approaches me. No one is trying to chase me out. Everything is still and quiet in the hall. I am holding this packet of letters. He approaches me and, smiling, looking me in the eyes, takes them. When taking the letters, he touches my middle finger with his middle finger. He takes the letters that I hold in my right hand with his left hand. When it happened, when our fingers touched, everything switched off before me, and I entered the state that yogis describe as samadhi. I didn't see anything. It all disappeared. It was for this you needed to carry those letters. That's it. It's really so. Everything disappeared, absolutely. There was nothing but his eye, the eyes of the universe. Nothing else. A complete concentration of unity. I came out of it when I noticed my body flipping over several times. At that moment, everyone jumped up, and Sevadals started to push them all away. So I flipped over several times and felt being thrown. I didn't feel pain or anything. I was thrown to the side, but I had already handed these letters to him. This is a game I had to play. Again. I want to say that what we are trying to understand, it's impossible. We can't say that this is so, that this is right. We can't come to this or that conclusion. We can't make this conclusion because conclusions are drawn by the mind when we are unconscious. What is consciousness? You're right to say that this is all and nothing at the same time. Speaking about lucid dreaming, what is a lucid dream? In its essence, it's meditation. A very important one. When lucid dreaming, we see shapes and forms, our body, and gain experiences. Sai Baba comes. You always have a very clear feeling that it's Sai Baba who comes to you for an inner view. There is never any doubt about it. If Sai Baba comes, it means he comes. You can't imagine it or force him to come, and never can you project him. Many people say, it may be a hallucination. No. Satya Sai Baba is not a hallucination. When he comes, your consciousness is very clear. You are absolutely sure that it's the reality unfolding before you. It's the Creator standing in front of you in the form of Satya Sai, your Sadguru, and this happens to you. It happens on the astral plane. What about the mental plane? On the mental plane, you only have eyes. There are no forms. In a lucid dream, you are an observer. You travel to some place instantaneously, and you just observe, as someone else does. This is you. This is the higher mental plane. This is why it's important not to sink down to the level of Muladhara, Svadhisthana, Manipura when people practice out-of-body traveling. These are not even lucid dreams, but rather spiritualism, when people leave their physical bodies through chakras, via lower spheres. We don't need to leave the body. What we need is to enter a spiritual state where Satya Sai Baba is waiting for us. On the physical plane, Baba often gave us knowledge that we could only gain on the physical plane. Why? This is what I started with. We all need to cleanse our mind. Everyone needs to cleanse their mind. For this we have yantras, mantras, the sensation of Tantra, or the presence of the Creator. A picture of Sai Baba is a tremendously powerful tool to unleash the mind's transformative potential, to transform the mind. He said, if you look at my picture, you look at me. This is a murti, something that transforms the mind. For the mind, it's crucial to have an image. If you feed it with abstraction, the mind will start to wander, and it will be hard for you to concentrate. And here you have a picture. There are many people who didn't know anything about yoga, but sincerely prayed to his portrait, as you mentioned it. And Vibhuti came out of his pictures, and different events happened. There were many proofs of the omnipresence of Baba. He knows what we hope for, what everyone hopes for, what dreams we have in our hearts. Even a small picture would do more than the entire engine of the universe. He defied all the laws. The laws of the entire hierarchy just stopped operating. He acted contrary to all the laws. He defied them just to demonstrate us the principle of unity and connectedness in action. When asked, "What have you come for?" Baba would answer, "I am here to show that God is very close to you. You think that I am somewhere out there. What is the common idea of all the religions, the so-called religions? They say that all of you are sinners. There is only the Creator, Jesus, let's say. He is waiting for you there in heaven and nowhere else." Master Jesus said, "The kingdom of God is within you." Sai Baba used to say, "I am within. It's the place to look for me." Why did he hide his body under those garments? We began to get used to the form. Apart from his mission to save Earth, to prevent the apocalypse, and so on, I have heard, and I believe it's true, that in 2011, when Fukushima nuclear reactor exploded, this is how I see this issue. I don't claim to be the ultimate truth. This is nothing but my opinion. At 7:38 India time, Sai Baba left his body. Scientists were already waiting for the second nuclear explosion because there was nothing that could lower the temperature. You know that after the decay process starts, nothing can stop the radioactive radiation. They already stopped pouring water on the damaged reactor. It just wouldn't cool down. So they simply waited for the second explosion. At 7:38 in the morning, Sai Baba leaves his physical body. And at 7:40, the temperature in the nuclear reactor decreases by 40%, and finally it cools down. And that's it. Scientists didn't understand why there was no explosion. Objectively, it was impossible to stop that process. We know of no physical means that could stop a nuclear explosion or a nuclear reaction once it starts, except for the power of the avatar and a high-level wise man reciting a mantra. It's not so easy to talk about Satya Sai's withdrawal from this world. Nonetheless, he left it on the night when both Catholics and Orthodox Christians celebrated the Easter. It was his last message about the unity. The principle of unity, that's it. And we know that many times when people took a photo of him while he was alive and developed the film at home later, they saw Jesus Christ in that picture. Do you remember that story when he allowed devotees of Jesus to take a picture of him? And when the picture was printed out, there was Jesus instead of him? Yes, many interesting cases are known. For example, a group of devotees of Satya Sai take a picture, and when they print it out, they see him among them. I saw such pictures, and I know people to whom it happened. In my life, there were many events that proved him being God incarnate. We've gone off topic, but in fact, this topic incorporates everything. I could talk about it for ages. I think we won't manage it in one stream. No, look. I'm keeping track of time. Tell us something else to finish the idea, and soon it will be time for us to call it a night. I think that we'll have many more streams talking about Satya Sai. This is a really inexhaustible subject. So you can finish that thought, and it will be time to finish up. I would like to say that we, you, me, all people, are incredibly fortunate. We are fortunate to have incarnated. We had to wait in line and found every unfair means to incarnate on earth to see Sai Baba here. This is what I wanted to say. Because Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said back in the day, it is said that 25 or 24 books were found that had been written in that epoch. And from the 16th volume of Bihar al-Anwar, we learn that the Prophet said, I see the future where the super being descends on earth. People who are near at that time will become incredibly happy. Many will wear white clothes and dots on their foreheads. He provides a very accurate description of what we can witness today, various religions. And most importantly, he describes Satya Sai Baba in meticulous detail. His clothes, appearance, birthmark, absolutely everything. And he calls him the super being. He wrote that he saw angels praying to the Almighty for a human incarnation to be able to see Sai Baba, to appeal to him, to contact him. This was his prophecy. So we are extremely lucky. People shouldn't harbor bitterness towards life if they had no opportunity to see Satya Sai Baba. Baba said that merely hearing about him was already a path to liberation. You and your books give us a wonderful opportunity not only to hear about him, but to see an image of who he was and how he worked. This is what's most important, and everyone will start to feel it, to experience it. This is why I think we should share the opportunity of interview with others. It may seem selfish, but in fact, my ego has known its place for long already because I have never pampered it. I used to practice rigorous asceticism. This is my mindset. But my friends who practice Kriya Yoga are lucky in this respect. Khadija, my wife, says, "You don't imagine how lucky you are, as you don't know how brutal he is towards himself." Why am I saying all this? It's impossible to destroy ego. Without ego, we would have no vector of development. We wouldn't have any desires. People without ego are either saint or mad. There is no third option. So we must cultivate a healthy ego capable of divine perception, an ego that is a God-seeker. As Sai Baba says, God equals man minus ego. But we can only make away with an ego that has already been completely worked off and erased. Then we can talk about being God. God-seekers need ego. They want to be better. They want to be the best. They want to learn to love. They want, and they want. This is their spiritual part that wants it. A spiritual desire is a good one. It has the right to exist. At this stage, this is very important, absolutely important. Even an endeavor to go to the ashram of Satya Sai Baba. Naturally, an endeavor to earn a financial reward. There were many business people around Sai Baba. They said, "Baba, we don't understand spirituality. You gave us your blessing for being efficient in the world. We are business people. Please give us your blessing to have even more." They have this right, and they are welcome. But he asks them to run a righteous business that would serve for the good of everyone. The world is changing, and we must shape this matrix the way it must be shaped without going to extremes as long as we are here. The home must be clean. The home must be beautiful. Our home is within this cube, an image of a cube, our universe. So it's very important to understand here that we are extremely fortunate on the one hand. But on the other hand, this is a huge and heavy responsibility that will bear throughout many years or even thousands of years. Actually now, for example, your books are a foundation for those who are yet to come. Imagine a great amount of people who will come to this world will read books by Holy Svetoslav, for example. It's not an example, but the truth of life. I'm saying this because for me, all people are holy. I'm not flattering nor using a tailored form of communication. This is really so. Each of us has this potential. Just imagine the responsibility you bear for every letter you type, for every comma you put, as you know how it can alter the meaning. This is a huge pressure. Sometimes I tell people certain things, and sometimes when telling them I think, "My God, how can you afford telling this? Are you sure that..." It's a great service. When we gain various experiences, lucid dreaming, Shaktipats, this is a great service, and you are one of those who serve. Not all people are aware of it. You often share your experiences, but not all people understand that it's a great service. We can't merely accept these tremendous cosmic states from God, we must share them. This is really important. It's impossible not to share. It's impossible not to share. One can't carry it alone. It will damage our souls. As a musician, I have many new ideas. When I had no instruments, I didn't know what to do with that energy. I tried to transform it. I appealed to Swami. I asked him, give me an opportunity to do it otherwise. These are living entities that require realization. The same is true for books. They are music frozen in words, music frozen in paintings. They are sound, energy, light, images. They are living entities. This is a huge power. That's why it's hard to carry it alone. I know about paranormalists, spiritual teachers, mediums, etc., who left this life because they suffered from serious diseases and couldn't transform this energy. In this respect, we are very lucky to have a spiritual system. The sublime practice of Kriya, which is the science of God realization, the holy science. It helps transform this energy and integrate it into life. For this I have chosen to be a musician. You have chosen to be a writer, to propagate the power of truth. This is also Shaktipat. When you share this teaching, when you share an image in your books, when you bring this knowledge to the world, this is nothing but Shaktipat. This is a very powerful initiation. One can get a knowing unconsciously, superconsciously through music, from heart to heart. At first the mind doesn't understand it, but later all becomes clear. We can get it through the mental plane. For example, you write a heart-piercing article or story about Sai Baba helping a woman who was praying, or a man, or a kid, doesn't matter. It forces tears down the reader's face. They cry. This is what Shaktipat is. This is the transmission that transforms the mind. It perceives a transformative image. One's heart opens up. Even on the physical plane, their cells begin to vibrate when people are captivated. This is a big responsibility and a great gift at the same time. Yes, here I have a tome of Srimad Bhagavatam depicting God incarnates. It carries the power of Shaktipat. As we are now talking about Satya Sai, as I write books about him, as we talk about satsangs, all these stories make us feel the presence of Satya Sai. Via them, people, now and in the future, can receive Shaktipat. It only requires them to open up, because Shaktipat is always given by him, and we must be continuously attuned. You have mentioned your new tome, and an image of the Creator popped up in my head. T, Om, Tom, the Creator, Tom, the Creator. Well, friends, thank you very much, Imram, for sharing your wisdom and stories. I'm absolutely sure that we will have more streams about Satya Sai. This theme is really inexhaustible. Similarly to that of Mahavatar Babaji that we discussed during our previous stream. I think we'll analyze it more in depth and tell more stories about Satya Sai and Mahavatar Babaji, whether in different episodes or when talking about both of them, because they are one Sai Babaji. I'm very grateful to our audience for having joined us today. Please, leave your comments below. We always read them. We don't always reply, but we read all of them. We appreciate all your opinions. Thank you very much for being there. Because our satsang is not only for the two of us, but for that great amount of people who watched us today. We are all together in the common field of Sai Baba's consciousness. Remarkably happy, as Imram put it. Remarkably happy people. Let's be happy. Until next time, friends. Om Sai Ram. Jai Sai Ram. Thank you.